Hello there! Welcome to Redman's Retro Replay Report for Q1 2025. Today I'll be going over the games I've been playing over the last few months and let you know my thoughts on them, as well as my plans for the near future. So to preface this video a little bit, I wanted to do this streaming project shortly after I turned 30 last year in November, because there's a lot of retro games, namely on the SNES and the PlayStation and other older consoles, that I never got to play growing up. I never owned a lot of these consoles, and there's a lot of really great retro games that I've wanted to either revisit or play entirely for the first time. So I wanted to start doing this streaming project as a result of that, and so in the past few months I have played 5 different games, and basically each quarter will be pretty much 5 games that will probably change a bit in the future iterations, but essentially you get the idea. I play 5 different games for roughly 2.5 weeks per each one, and I stream it all on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/Redman94. And I wanted to start that at the beginning of this year, because the project will go on for quite a long period of time, or at least I am planning for it to be that way. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the first game that I played this year, starting with Super Mario World. So right at the very beginning, I decided let's do the launch title for Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo, because I played that last year on an emulator. I actually technically played it on my Wii, because I actually have that game on Virtual Console on my Wii. So it is an emulator of sorts, but it's an official one because I got it on the Virtual Console way back in the day, and never actually finished it until literally last year. But now I actually have an actual Super Nintendo and played it all the way through. Last year I only did a casual playthrough of just trying to beat the game, but this time I decided to do a full-blown 96 exit playthrough, which is essentially getting like 100%. And I'll be honest, it was really fun. I had a pretty good time playing the game and experiencing all the different levels. Getting really solid with the cape and learning how to use it over time was actually really fun, because in my original playthrough last year, I actually never took the time to learn how the mechanics of the cape actually worked. So being able to do that, even just from a casual perspective, was actually pretty sick and pretty useful to do. Something else that I did in this playthrough that proved to be very, very useful compared to when I did it the first time around was I actually used the top secret area to get a whole bunch of lives, get capes that I needed. It never really needed the Fire Flower power up, but get Yoshi as well. So if I ever ran low on lives, or I ever was down to my last life, instead of game overing and going back to my previous save, I would just run all the way back to the secret area and get 20 lives, or however many lives I needed in order to progress. And that made the playthrough a lot more enjoyable and a lot more lenient for me making mistakes, essentially. That made it pretty fun. I was pretty happy to do 96 exits. I think the mechanics of the game, even from a casual perspective, was pretty fun. But then I got into doing speedrunning, even from a pretty casual perspective. I didn't get to learning ridiculous clips or out of bounds stuff. None of the hard glitches. I did glitchless 11 exit as the category that I primarily speedran for a bit. After doing that for a bit, literally on my second finished attempt, in fact, I got a 13 minute and 10 second PB, which was quite astounding actually, because I don't think I died at all throughout the run. So it made sequential runs after that quite a bit difficult to run against. So I actually wasn't able to PB again until a few streams later, and I think that just barely wasn't a sub 13. But my goal, since getting that second completed run to be at 13:10, was to get a sub 13. I'm it surely wouldn't be that hard, right? And it took a little bit, but I was able to finally get there with a 12:57. So I was happy about that because a 13-minute time is that barrier. Once you get past that minute barrier, that's when the milliseconds start being counted, and the moderators in the speedrun.com leaderboard for Super Mario World, that's when, for specifically 11 exit glitchless, that's when they start having to frame count your run and actually verify it through a strenuous process. So that's what happened with mine, and it took like a couple of weeks for it to even be fully verified, but they verified it, and it actually ended up being slightly faster than I originally had anticipated, or what I frame counted, which was just pausing the exact frame that Peach comes out of the Koopa ship and whatever. But yeah, it was actually pretty fun to do it. I think 11 exit glitchless is actually kind of a nice quick category to get you acclimated with how like the game works and all that, and going through was actually pretty fun. I definitely pretty extensively enjoyed doing Super Mario World, enough to the point where even at the very end of it, I like wanted to do all castles speedruns, or I wanted to like get familiar with the route for it, but obviously didn't have enough time to actually invest in doing all castles. But I'm still glad that I got to spend the time that I did with actually doing the run, because I think it was pretty fun in that regard. Part of the reason why I wasn't able to fully finish all castles is because I actually went to AGDQ earlier this year in early January, and so obviously that cut into time with me streaming, but I definitely think the trip was extremely worth doing, because not only was it the first GDQ that I ever went to, but I got to see a whole bunch of really awesome runs in person, and I think that was like super cool. So yeah, I was really happy about being able to go to AGDQ, because watching all the different runs, like my favorite run that I got to watch in person was actually the Super Metroid rando race at the very end. We were up until like 2 in the morning watching it, but it was really awesome. And I even got to meet one of the newer Super Metroid speedrunners, Guppy Pay, because she was actually there at the event, and it was fun to get to talk with her and hang out, and even get to watch some of the final runs with her in like some of the front row seats. That was legitimately super cool, and I'm even just that alone made the event like super fun to be able to experience. But like I also got to meet like Ryan Ford there, I got to meet Dan Salvato, I got to meet Oats and Goats even. That was also really cool. I got to talk to him a little bit about some of the Super Metroid runs that he's been doing. So overall, really solid experience. Like even for me, going by myself entirely with no friends, I like basically didn't know anyone that much prior, you know, like besides like the people that I already mentioned. But going was actually really sick, and I'm definitely want to do it again. Though I don't want to do it this year. Again, I'm not trying to do it in the summer, and I'm not trying to do it actually next winter, not for next AGDQ, but I think the next GDQ I'd like to go to is SGDQ in 2026. So that gives me plenty of time to kind of do more actual things in the speedrunning communities, as well as feel like it's been a long enough period of time where, the excitement of going back and maybe even potentially going with some new friends of mine, or even some other friends of mine that I've known for longer, would be really cool. So that's where I spent my time, you know, during the Super Mario World era. Oh, in fact, I even watched the Super Mario World 96 exit race at AGDQ, so that was also like a cool like little bonus. The game that I was already playing was being played in an actual run, and in the practice room, not only were there tons and tons of CRTs that I was just entranced by to the point where I was like, wow, this is actually so cool to see, but there were plenty of people that were playing all sorts of different games, including Super Mario World Kaizo, namely. But yeah, like I had a lot of fun with that period of time, not only playing Super Mario World, but also going to AGDQ. So the next game that I invested time into, or that was on the list essentially, is the other launch title that I was interested in on the Super Nintendo, which is F-Zero. I originally played this as well last year, and actually had quite a bit of fun with how in-depth like kind of the mechanics were. Like, it felt like an actual kind of skill-based racing game. And I knew kind of just from the onset that I wanted to play this game and speedrun it to a degree. Like, I wanted... I know all I did last year was I beat all 3 leagues on the expert difficulty, but this time around I wanted to beat them all on the master difficulty. There is some irony that the King League, which is the last league out of all 3 of them, that one took me longer to beat on expert this time around, and master actually didn't take very long at all. I thought I was going to be stuck on the master difficulty for quite some time, but apparently not. That's pretty cool if you ask me. But I had fun learning the different courses and even just trying to like keep up and not get disqualified from having too poor of a rank proved to be a challenge throughout a lot of it, and oftentimes a very satisfying challenge. So I'm glad I was able to do that. Definitely some frustrating points, of course, because it's still a pretty difficult game, and the CPUs can be very, very aggressive and annoying as hell to deal with, and it can be very, very annoying. But it was still pretty fun. I'm still glad that I did it, and I still, just from a casual perspective, very, very much worth doing. Now, for speedrunning, F-Zero is definitely the one that I spent, I think out of all the games that I have played this past quarter, F-Zero is the one that I spent the most time actually speedrunning it, and I did it in 2 different categories. The first category that I did was Night League, which is the first league that you can play, and I played that on beginner difficulty because I thought that would just be easiest. I wouldn't have to worry about not even being able to finish races by placing too low and stuff. I wanted to do just beginner and just focus on that. And I actually came to the conclusion that I could also get a sub 13 minute time in Night League, much like I did with Super Mario World. So that was kind of my goal with Night League, is I wanted to get a sub 13. That admittedly took me a little bit longer because getting a sub 13 in Night League is admittedly, I think, more difficult than getting a sub 13 in Super Mario World 11 Exit Glitchless. But it didn't take me too long to get there. It definitely felt satisfying to finally get the sub 13 that I had been looking for. Then, when I started doing Grand Prix runs, I ended up in the midst of me trying to improve in that time. I think I was at the time getting a 43 20 something or 30 something. I had one run that was so good that it ended up actually making me PB my Night League time by 7 whole seconds, because before I had a 12:58 in Night League, and then I PB'd by 7 whole seconds to get a 12:51. And at first I thought it was a 12:52 because I actually didn't even see that it said 12:51 the second that I crossed the finish line in silence. And I had to go back and see that it was actually a 12:51, and I was like, wow, I played that so well that I was only off my sum of best by 2.5 seconds. And most of that 2.5 seconds was in Deathwind 1 specifically. So the fact that I only had one track that was basically kind of average, and then everything else actually went really well. I think I golded 2 of the tracks. I think the Silence was definitely a gold, and I think even Sand Ocean, 2 of the most difficult courses that I really struggled with over the course of me speedrunning F-Zero, were the ones I, interestingly enough, golded in my PB, which I think is really stellar. And that was me attempting to do Grand Prix runs, so I wasn't trying to PB in Night League, it just kind of happened. But because it was Grand Prix, I kept going. And that run, every track after that, up until the later section of Queen League, I was actually saving time on each split, to the point where I was basically 20 seconds ahead of my time. And if I kept that pace up, I could have very well had a sub 43 minute time in Grand Prix, which would have been ridiculous. That would have been because I already knew that, getting a pretty good time somewhere in the 43 minute mark Grand Prix was already kind of pretty difficult, but getting a sub 43, even just barely on beginner difficulty, that would have been really difficult, and I had to have an absolute god run. But that run where I PB'd my Night League and continued on, that was the closest that I could have gotten to being that. But it unfortunately died in Whiteland 1, so oh well. But that's the run that, like, of all the speed runs that I have done, at least like so far and probably for a while, that's definitely the one where it's like I performed like the best and most consistent throughout the entire thing. And I'm really happy about how that run went, and that I feel like that's kind of like sort of like, I didn't mean for it to be a crowning achievement, because I didn't like grind for it like really hard. I didn't like have a specific goal. It just happened, and it's like, dang, looking back and retiming this is brilliant. Like, this, I actually like knocked this out the park considering my skill level and how much time I've actually spent on F-Zero. So that's definitely a highlight for sure. So the third game that I ended up playing in this recent quarter that has concluded is actually 2 games in one. I decided to kind of split it up a little bit, and I'll explain why, but I ended up playing Sonic 1 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles on the Sega Genesis. So I had never played Sonic the Hedgehog 1 before. I grew up playing a lot of different Sonic games, but I never played the original on the Genesis, nor have I ever played Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I didn't want to spend the entire 2.5 weeks playing Sonic 1 because I have heard that prior to playing it, that it is not like the best Sonic game. It gets pretty slow at parts, the mechanics are pretty meh. It just kind of from the get-go, I felt like I didn't want to spend an extended amount of time playing the game, even from a casual perspective, nor really even speedrunning it, because it seemed to me kind of from the get-go that speedrunning it might have been a little bit on the obnoxious side. Halfway through the 2.5 weeks, I actually ended up pivoting to Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But first, I wanted to talk about Sonic 1. So the good things about the game are definitely the graphics looked pretty solid for the time, for it being a game that came out in 1991. The music is easily one of the best parts. Like, I think the music is freaking stellar in that game. It is so good, in fact, that I even got the physical CD for it, because it's just that memorable and very catchy, and I kept having songs specifically from Sonic 1 stuck throughout my head throughout those 2 weeks, so definitely props to the soundtrack. And there were some levels that were pretty fun, like Green Hill Zone, definitely a pretty solid one. Starfield, I think, was also pretty good. And there's one more that I'm kind of forgetting, because I remember more easily the ones that weren't so great, like Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone and Scrap Brain Zone especially. There's definitely a number of zones in the game that... Oh, it's Spring Yard Zone. Yeah, Spring Yard Zone's the one that was also kind of fun. But, like, half the zones are pretty decent experiences, and then the other half are, like, slogs to get through, and they're, they don't feel like Sonic games, but it is the way that it is. And it's like, yeah, as I kept playing more of it, I found myself not really enjoying it that much, and it was a little bit frustrating in certain aspects. So making the decision to not actually take the time to speedrun the game, I think, was a good call. I appreciate it for its novelty and what it was doing for at the time, but like, comparing it to Super Mario World, like, it's got practically nothing on Super Mario World. Like, sure, you can go faster than Mario most of the time in the game, but like, let's be real. I don't think they're not the same game. Super Mario World is so much more of a polished and better overall experience than Sonic 1 was. So the fact that it was such a hotly contested competitive game, couple of games in the early 90s in the US is like kind of interesting in retrospect. Yeah, now Sonic 1 kind of left much to be desired. I definitely think out of all 5 games that I've played this past quarter, Sonic 1 is the one I liked the least, unfortunately. But I'm still glad I took the time to play it. I got to experience it. I did try to even get all the emeralds in the game, and that was pretty frustrating, unfortunately. Like, all the special zones or whatever, like the whole ping pong pachinko thing that you got going on was really not that fun. It was really hard to control and even get the Chaos Emeralds, and you really only had like one chance, and then you only had like the first 2 acts of each zone to even get one. And so like sometimes even in a run, like if you just didn't get enough emeralds by a certain point, you just could not finish with the getting all 6 emeralds. And it was like, I got very close. I think I got 5 emeralds in a single run at some point, but I just couldn't do it in Scrap Brain Zone or whatever. That was a little bit unfortunate, but you know, I tried my best with Sonic 1. Now, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, on the other hand, that was really, really worth my time. I honestly wish I spent 2.5 weeks on that game instead, because that game was great. Oh, the music, actually better than Sonic 1. Like, Sonic 1 already had pretty good music. The music in Sonic 3 and Knuckles is, like, legendary. It is timeless. Cinema. Peak. It's actually so good how good the music is in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I think I even, like, give it, like, a 10. Like, it's a 10 out of 10 music for sure. Audio, even sound design in the game is phenomenal. Like, level design's a lot better. I love that you can play as Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails in it instead of just Sonic. The Knuckles levels actually being their own difficulty, harder than Sonic and Knuckles level, or Sonic and Tails levels, I should say, was a really cool, appealing aspect. But just the fact that Knuckles could take different paths and he had different bosses from, you know, Sonic and Tails was actually really, really cool. But still, between all 3 of them, you got to experience different ways to play the game. And I think that was, like, probably one of the coolest aspects about it. Another thing is getting the actual Chaos Emeralds, doing the special stages in Sonic 3 and Knuckles is actually fun compared to Sonic 1, because getting blue spheres and going around a big, like, globe or whatever is actually really fun, not to mention, again, the banger soundtrack that plays during those special stages. But, like, it gets a little bit faster and faster as you do them, and it's fun and it's exciting, and then actually pulling it off and getting the Chaos Emerald, it feels so rewarding. Hell, even finding the actual special stage rings littered throughout the different zones was really fun and rewarding, because you had to actually go out of your way to find them. You had to, like, climb walls or do, like, a certain spring thing. You had to, like, really search for them. So when you found one, I felt like I had unlocked, like, a reward, or like, oh, I get a chance to get another emerald here, and I think that's really, really cool. I absolutely think Sonic 3 and Knuckles knocked it out of the park. I really wish I had more time to play it so that I could have gotten all the emeralds, or at least tried to. I feel like getting another chance at getting an emerald or going back to a special stage is not very easy, because the ring disappears after you, like, fail an attempt or whatever, so you'd have to try again, like, the next one. So I imagine it would have been a bit of a grind to do it, but it would have been at least a fun grind compared to Sonic 1. And then there's even the aspect of potentially speedrunning it. Like, I think speedrunning maybe the Sonic levels would have been pretty fun, in all honesty. Like, that would have, I think, been a pretty good time. But I just ran out of time with playing the game, because I only dedicated, 5 streams to it, so... Oh well. I don't know if I'll ever return to it to, like, actually, like, seriously speedrun it and the like, but I'm definitely glad that I took the time to play it and finish it and experience it for what it was. It definitely was one of, like, my favorites to play out of the 5. Like, it's just funny how, like, a stark difference between Sonic 1 and Sonic 3 and Knuckles was in terms of levels of enjoyment, you know? It's up there. I don't think it quite beat Super Mario World for me personally, but it's very close. Like, they're, like, almost, like, right next to each other, essentially. Sonic 3 and Knuckles, banger game. Absolutely, like, recommend you play it. So, for the 4th game that I played Final Fantasy IV. Now, I originally played this last year on a SNES emulator, so I played the SNES version, and that version was pretty easy, but it did introduce me to the idea of playing these old school JRPGs that I actually found to be pretty fun and pretty cool, And I'm actually really glad that I got to experience that, because it really turned me on the idea of actually playing the later Final Fantasy games, namely like 6, 7, 8, 9, and even 10, because I actually really like the ATB system that was introduced in 4, and it seems to only be improved upon in future Final Fantasies. So 4 is really what I can thank for turning me on to the JRPGs, or at least the Final Fantasies of the time, and me being actually excited for them. The SNES playthrough, admittedly, was a bit on the easy side and very, very simplistic, but I still enjoyed it, and I enjoyed all the character development and stuff like that. But this time around, when I played it earlier this year, from like February to March, I decided I wanted to play it on the PS1 version instead of playing it on SNES again, because admittedly, the localization for the SNES version is pretty not great. Very bare bones translation, like, because they only had so much room to do with like the text or the limitations of the SNES at the time. The PS1 version with Final Fantasy Chronicles has a much better translation. It's not perfect by any means, but it is much better than the SNES version. Not to mention, more importantly, a lot of the removed content that was like censored out or just taken out entirely, most of it was due to censoring in the SNES version, was added back into the PS1 version. So like, for example, Cecil's ability to cast darkness very early on in the game is not in the SNES version, but it's in the PS1 version. So that added a bit of depth. Same thing with the battle items. I didn't know those even existed until I played the PS1 version, because I'm pretty sure those don't even exist in the SNES version, and that added a layer of complexity to the fights and to the battles. Not to mention, of course, the most important thing, the PS1 version is significantly harder. It is actually the hard-type version of Final Fantasy IV that was originally released on the Super Famicom back in 1991, or 92, I believe. I forgot what year exactly it was, but you get the point. It was hard on the Super Famicom, but it was dumbed down to easy type when it was released in the US. But for the PS1 version, when that released, it's the hard type. So, with that, it was not a cakewalk to try to get through. In fact, I didn't even finish the game. I got stuck on the final boss, Zeromus, to the point where I even felt the need to actually grind my party to go up at least like 5 levels just to feel like having a chance at Zeromus, and that still wasn't enough. I would estimate that I'd need probably like 5 more levels to give it a much better fighting chance, but man, Zeromus unfortunately proved to be too difficult for me, and not to mention I like ran out of time. So that was the only like really frustrating part about playing Final Fantasy IV, but everything else about it was actually really, really fun. All the boss fights and a lot of the encounters were improved upon greatly, to the point where I actually had to like do very fast DPS. I had to do fast menuing or whatever it might have been, but like every boss fight had like its own unique kind of challenge. I even went out of my way to get all the like summons that Rydia could do. So I did like Odin, I did Bahamut, I did pretty much all the extra content that I could have done that I didn't do in my original playthrough. And I did use the Brady Games guide for Final Fantasy Chronicles, and it was fun to follow along with that and help out, because it did help with some strategies, but some other ones it wasn't super helpful on. But there's definitely, like, especially some of the bosses to collect like the more powerful items in like the lunar subterrane, that some of those bosses were really, really cool. Like the Lunar Sauruses and the Plague boss both were very unique mechanics, because like I already thought when I played the SNES version that like the Asura summon fight that you do to have Rydia learn Asura, I already thought that was pretty unique, but man, did I get to learn how many more boss fights are unique and very interesting throughout Final Fantasy IV. So in all honesty, even though I didn't finish, I couldn't beat Zeromus on this playthrough that I did, I still would like to play Final Fantasy IV at some point in the future on the DS, or at least namely the 3D remake, because the 3D remake is still like a different experience in a way. It's like difficult, but in like I think a different way than the PS1 version is. Plus, like, you know, with all the 3D graphics and like, and there's also like more character development and dialogue written with like the speech bubble system that I think the DS version has. I think there's even bonus content, maybe, I don't remember exactly, but like I do think I want to do even a third playthrough of Final Fantasy IV on the DS, because I think it's just that interesting. If I had more time, I maybe would have been down to try to speedrun it in some way, shape, or form, but I don't know. It definitely would have to be a subcategory. Doing a full game speedrun would take way too long, not to mention probably be really freaking difficult. So I saw that like there's the Paladin category for SNES, and that's like the most popular category because it runs like just under an hour, and that was somewhat appealing to me, but I kind of wanted to do the PS1 version because it is more of a challenge and stuff, but oh well, I didn't end up having really any time to do it, and I don't really think I care too much to revisit doing Final Fantasy IV in the near future, at least as far as speedrunning it. That's what I have to say about Final Fantasy IV. The last game that I ended up playing in this past quarter is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I originally did a full playthrough of this actually in July of 2023 as a retro gaming thing specifically around the Legend of Zelda and Metroid franchise. During the summer of 2023, I played Link to the Past and Super Metroid in that period of time, and that's what made me really realize that not only do I liked Link to the Past, but I really super liked Super Metroid, so I very, very got into watching speedruns of it, starting pretty much immediately as soon as I was done with my Super Metroid speedrun back in July of 2023. But that was the last time I played Link to the Past, and in that playthrough, I just wanted to beat the game because I had not beaten it before, and that was kind of the goal. But this time around, when I streamed it, I wanted to try to 100% it. I wanted to get all the heart pieces. I wanted to get all the items that I didn't get before, namely the magic cape, because I actually didn't get that the first time around, and especially in Ganon's Tower, that would prove to be very, very helpful. So getting that this time around and doing that was actually a lot of fun. Even though I kind of like already knew where most of everything was, I still used a guide. I still actually used a reprint of the Link to the Past guide that I got off of Etsy, you know, back in 2023. And it was actually pretty helpful in a lot of spots. It didn't reveal everything as it didn't need to, but being able to even use it at all is still kind of cool, and I think that kind of added the experience. So I'm glad I was able to capture that for my stream and actually have the playthrough be relatively short. I actually ended up finishing the game in 4 streams, which was pretty cool. That leads me to, you know, speedrunning it. So unfortunately, there were some bumps in the road with actually being able to do that. I was planning originally to start learning Master Sword once I was done with my casual playthrough, like 2 days later, but I made the unfortunate mistake of playing Super Smash Bros. Melee Slippy Ranked on the day that I was going to do that, and unfortunately that session went so poorly that I ended up getting depressed for 20 hours after the fact. And that obviously was during the time that I was going to stream it, and I don't want to stream when I'm feeling legitimately depressed, so I didn't. And I didn't stream that Saturday either. I didn't even stream until Sunday to stream some practice and getting familiar with the Master Sword route. That sucked. And then I wanted to stream again on Tuesday and Wednesday, but then IRL stuff ended up happening that put me in a bad headspace, so I again didn't want to stream for a bit, and then I didn't want to do it on Friday, and then I had something else on Saturday, and it's just... I basically went like an entire week without streaming any more Link to the Past because of extenuating circumstances and just all sorts of things that were unfortunately out of my control that made it hard for me to want to stream or even be motivated. So unfortunately, I missed out on a whole bunch of streams to actually speedrun A Link to the Past. And this got me really thinking. I'm like, you know, I really like Link to the Past speedrunning community. because I actually have an IRL friend that has been speedrunning A Link to the Past for quite a few years now, and his name is Yerok, which is just his first name, Corey, which is just spelled backwards, but he's been in the Melee community in my state for multiple decades. Yeah, over 20 years. He's played Melee for, so he's been around, and that's how I met him originally, was through Melee, but he's also, for the past few years, been very, very into A Link to the Past, so I have kind of wanted to get into Link to the Past personally myself, you know, since I know someone within the community, and not to mention, the speedrunning community around A Link to the Past is quite thriving, quite active. There's a lot of people that stream it on a consistent basis. Very friendly. You can ask pretty much whatever questions you want, and they will help you out. They even have like live VCs where if you're like streaming your practice or your runs, you can have like live feedback from people, or you can ask questions and get immediate help on things, which I think is like super, super cool. So the fact that like I wasn't able to really do any of that during this like 2.5 weeks period really got me thinking like, you know, I think I want to try to spend a lot more time on speedrunning, specifically A Link to the Past, because I didn't even get to start doing runs with Master Sword, and who knows if I want to maybe go beyond that. What I am going to start doing for the next quarter, or over the next few months, is I am going to practice A Link to the Past and do runs, you know, after a good bit of practice, once I'm getting a lot more comfortable with actually doing runs. I'm going to do that both off stream and on stream, but with doing it on stream, I'm only going to do it for the first hour of me streaming. So the first hour, I will dedicate myself to be doing A Link to the Past practice, and then once that hour is over, I will then switch to the casual game. That is a part of my retro gaming backlog. That is the normal content for my stream, because I see a lot of Super Metroid speedrunners do something similar. They'll have like a casual day, or they'll have a casual game that they want to play, but they always start with their main speed game that they do for, you know, at least a few hours or so, and then they switch over. And so I'm kind of wanting to take that idea and kind of crunch it down into like a smaller period of time, because I don't want to potentially burn out. And I think doing practice and runs in bite-sized amounts on a daily basis is something that I can work with and I can be comfortable with over a long period of time. At least I want to try it over the next few months. So that's what I'm going to go for. I want to be a lot more involved. I want to, you know, get more help and try to improve at actually doing the speed runs. So first doing Master Sword, and then potentially working my way to doing full no major glitches runs, because I think that'd be kind of fun. Now, admittedly, I don't have a FX Pack Pro yet, but I do plan on getting one probably in like early May or so. So in the meantime, I'm just gonna have to deal with just doing things on an original cart and just having like multiple save files and the like, and hopefully, you know, doing Master Sword over a month will kind of get me through that way, so that once I get an FX Pack Pro, I'm like ready to go into later sections of the game. But I think for the meantime, I can be fine with what I have for right now, so that's what I think I'm going to roll with, essentially. I'm going to incorporate speedrunning more regularly, like a specific game, into the beginning of every stream for basically an hour. So it's going to be Link to the Past for the first hour for pretty much every stream, all the way through at least the end of this quarter. It might even go further by the time I do the next one of these reports, but we'll see. I think it sounds like a fun idea, and it sounds very doable, and I think I could get probably pretty decent. I don't expect to go anywhere like major with speedrunning. I don't expect I'm not trying to get like world record or anything like that. I don't even think I have like a goal time in mind. I just want to try to get very familiar with how like the runs go, so that when I do watch people speedrun the game, I have a lot more intricate understanding of how people actually speedrun and what to expect, and see things from an actual runner's perspective instead of just purely a spectator's perspective. That's kind of the whole spiel about what I plan on doing over the next quarter and what I'm changing as far as like how I'm structuring the streams. The only other change that I'm necessarily doing is I'm just streaming on different days. Instead of it being Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, I'm going to be doing Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday instead, because that kind of adheres a bit better to my schedule and my availability and stuff. And so I think that works a little bit better. It's still 4 days a week. I don't really think I want to reduce the number of days, and I still feel like 3 days breaks is enough time for me to get, not feel like I'm going to burn out on this. I had a rough past week at the end of me doing the Link to the Past stuff, so I definitely want to kind of like make up for it. And the thing is, if this goes really, really well with Link to the Past, eventually I'm going to adapt this for Super Metroid, because I really, really want to speedrun that game like a lot, because I know that game especially is difficult and requires a lot of practice, so I can kind of learn a good bit of things through A Link to the Past and then build my way up towards Super Metroid. And hell, who even knows what other game I decide to run in the future, but like, part of me really misses getting involved in speedrunning and being part of a community, like I did back in 2021 and 2022 when I was very involved with Quake and with Diabolical at the time. I miss that, and I see that similar kind of thing going on with Super Metroid and A Link to the Past, so I really want to be involved in that stuff again. So that's essentially the plan. That's essentially what I think I'm going to do over the course of the next few months, and I'm honestly looking really forward to seeing how it pans out. I think it'll be fun, and I think I'll have a good time with it. The reason that I kind of started this whole idea of doing the speedrunning thing, like practice on a daily basis, is I recently acquired a 9-inch PVM that I really, really like. It is a Sony 9044Q that is an import from Japan, in fact, and it is easily my favorite PVM. I have a whole bunch of CRTs now. I have 7 different CRTs in my apartment, and that one is easily my favorite one. And the cool thing is it sits right on top of my 14M4U that I use for streaming, and when I'm streaming I use it to display chat, but off stream I have, since the 18th of March, I have actually been using it to practice Melee on specifically. Every day in the morning, it's like part of a morning routine, because I thought to myself, I could just spend this time in the morning like getting good at a game that I like kind of care about. I could do this for Melee, and then it occurred to me very recently, I could do this for other games too. I could do this for a speed game. I could do this for A Link to the Past. I could do this for Super Metroid. I could do this for basically whatever. And I would imagine that doing daily practice for like 40 or so minutes on average each time, daily for months, would probably get me somewhere pretty decent, and I get a pretty good understanding of how things would go. So yeah, I think continuing that tradition. Part of me still gonna want to play Melee here and there, casually of course. I am pretty convinced that I'm definitely past the point of caring about trying to compete in the game, but I still think the game is fun, and I like playing it casually and doing friendlies and the like, and I still want to go to like tournaments and bring setups and all that. I want my grinding and try-harding stuff to be primarily around like speedrunning, but I still want to do like Melee practice and stuff here and there, so I've figured out a way to balance it out. So yeah, that's essentially the plans that I have for the next few months, and yeah, I think that pretty much concludes the Redman Retro Replay Report for Q1 2025. Stay tuned for the next one at the end of June. Y'all have a good one. Peace out.